A quick word about Up First from NPR. Breaking news, as you've probably noticed, is pretty broken. You're constantly doom scrolling on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it, and maybe you feel a little bit of, I'm over it, I'm over the news. Well, if this sounds like you, I recommend that you listen to the Up First podcast from NPR. You get everything you need to know in an easy 15-minute update. Look, if you listen to this show, it is very likely that you follow the news and you care about politics, just like me. But I think one of the best choices you can make is decide how to engage with the news. And Up First is a perfect way to distill down to just the information you need to help you understand the news without getting overwhelmed and feeling that sense of news paralysis. Up First is national and international. There's facts and information, but there's also personality and analysis. Start your day every day with Up First. Change the way that you consume the news. Listen now to the Up First podcast from NPR.
Hello there, it's Kellie Carter Jackson chiming in with This Day. On Sundays, during the first year of the second Trump administration, we're doing episodes that we like to call Some Sunday Context. Sometimes those are chats about the news, and sometimes those are episodes from the archives that might help us better understand what's going on today. And today, since we're at the very end of a very weird Black History Month, we wanted to bring you an episode about the origins of Black History Month, originally known as Negro History Week. But first, some thoughts on what this Black History Month has been like. First of all, I've been busier than ever with each new announcement about closing or canceling Black celebrations, Black graduations, or cultural institutions. Folks are also refusing. People are doubling down, and I am here for it. Shoot, I'm about to go to Black Excellence Gala this weekend, and I've been thinking about not just Black History Month, but about Black Studies. As you know, I'm the chair of the Africana Studies Department at Wellesley College, and my department was birthed from activism. Black students across the country and here at Wellesley demanded a department where they could learn about Black history, leaders, and Black contributions to American society, and even be taught by professors that shared their Blackness or values. And it was in the 1960s that a wave of scholars, both Black and white, began to revise textbooks and create new scholarship that included the lived experiences of Black people. College campuses created affinity groups and safe spaces to celebrate Black pride or lament in moments of loss. I do what I do because of those who came before me and paved the way. And as a 19th century scholar, I think about the origins of Black education. Learning was illegal for Black people. Literacy was outlawed. Black schools were constantly being attacked and physically destroyed. But here's the thing. Black history, Black heroes, Black contributions have always been threatened. So in these current times, I'm actually weirdly comforted by the idea that the tactics of today's administration are not new. But I'm also empowered by remembering what Black people accomplished with so much less than what we have today. We don't need to be afraid. It is impossible to eradicate Black history with an executive order. Black people and their allies have always demanded, required, created, and sustained the work of liberation. And that work continues. That work continues every day, 365. So I'm not going to say Happy Black History Month. I'm just going to say, Happy Black History. Keep refusing. Okay, so now let's listen to an episode from the archives, and we'll be back with another episode on Tuesday.
Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. We're trying something a little different this week. It's sort of a theme week, let's call it. Our next 3 episodes are going to be devoted to a few different stories that feel like they get at what we mark in every February, which is Black History Month. So stick with me here. This is Black History Month week here at This Day in Esoteric Political History. But look, 3 episodes that maybe help us understand how Black History Month came to be and some of the bigger questions about Black history, how it's been studied and celebrated and so forth. So Today, this episode, February 13th, we go to 1924 and look at some of the roots of Black History Month, which started in many ways with a man named Carter G. Woodson, who came up with the notion at that point in 1924 of doing Negro History Week, which would eventually morph into Black History Month. Woodson, also an incredibly fascinating person who I don't think we've talked about on this show, son of former slaves, historian, academic, and really one of the early champions of studying and acknowledging the Black experience in this country. So, here to discuss Carter Woodson, two historians, how fitting, who knew? Nicole Hammer of Columbia and Kellie Carter Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there, Jody. Can I just say that,
Yes.
Black History Month is like retail at Christmas for Black historians. It is the worst. I shouldn't say the worst. It is the busiest, craziest month for me. It goes by in a blur, and I look up, and it's like
Sweeps
March,
week?
right? Yeah, it's pretty much that all month long.
Yeah, I think we'll circle around the notion of, why is it that we only celebrate and talk about this for 1 month, and why is it the shortest month of the year, which I know people like to point out. But we will get to all of that. But Kellie, why February?
So February is really significant for two reasons. One, because it is believed to be the birth month of Frederick Douglass. Most enslaved people did not know the exact day that they were born. So they chose a particular month, and February was chosen by Frederick Douglass. And also, it is Abraham Lincoln's birthday, the first president to sign the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. And so it is a time where we can recognize both men that have made significant contributions to the lived experiences of Black people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's interesting that it's those two men, right? That it wasn't necessarily two Black people, but it was more about the journey from enslavement to freedom than it was necessarily just about representation.
Oh, for sure.
Well, let's go to that right there, because I feel like this is one of the sort of central questions is, as you conceive of Black history in this country, how much is it entirely the history of the legacy of slavery, and how much is Negro History Week, as it was called then, and Black History Month has evolved? Has it sort of taken on other meanings and other goals?
Yeah, I think it's become more of a moment to acknowledge Black contributions to this country. I think it's also become a bunch of factoids, did you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of those going on Twitter right now where you get to see these fun facts about what Black people have invented or created, or, who is the head or the first in their organization or within their company. So that's kind of cool. But for the most part, when it started out, it was meant to really highlight heroes like Crispus Attucks, heroes like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and to talk about Black people up until that point, because it's 1926 when Carter G. Woodson created Negro History Week.
Yeah.
And Woodson is really important here because the reason he is establishing this week is he himself is a historian. He got an undergraduate degree in history from the University of Chicago. He got his PhD in history from Harvard University. He was only the second Black person to get a PhD in the United States, the first to get one in history. I think W.E.B. Du Bois got it from Harvard in maybe sociology. Anyway, so he's a historian, and he has all these texts about U.S. history, and the books that he's looking at, they don't include the story of Black Americans at all. And he wants to start telling that story and incorporating that story into how U.S. history is written about and how it's taught. And so that idea of contributions is really driving a lot of this work at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A big part of this is pedagogy. So how do we create lesson plans, and how do we incorporate these people, these figures into our history, into the classrooms, so that Black students in particular can learn about themselves and have a sense of cultural pride about where they come from and about who they have descended from, and what great things that their people have accomplished. And so a lot of this for Carter G. Woodson is also about instilling not just information, but cultural pride.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there to tease out, but I do think it is so important to highlight that, yes, he is a historian and his focus is on the teaching of this history. And I mean, that makes it also more relevant to today, where it's not just a celebration or a bunch of factoids, but really the origin of Black History Month is about what do we teach, whose story do we tell, how do we go into schools and talk about this stuff. And of course, that stuff is all circling back right now in a really resonant way. Not that it ever really went away. But, Kellie, to something you just hinted at there, Woodson seems to be doing two things that aren't necessarily in conflict, but are in sort of interesting balance, which is one, we need to tell a story to ourselves as Black Americans, and also we need to tell a story to the rest of the country.
Yeah, Carter G. Woodson is great because he doesn't just start Negro History Week. He also starts the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which later becomes the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, of which I am a proud member. But he also starts the Journal of African American History, which was formerly known as the Journal of Negro History. And what he's trying to do is canonize Black history, life, and culture, so that once it becomes a part of the mainstream, when it's in the textbooks, when it's in the academic journals, when it's operating at a K through 12 level, but also at a collegiate and university level, it's a game changer in how people understand the importance and central role that Black people have played in this country. So he's trying to really get at this from all fronts. It includes things as simple as children's literature and children's books, but also textbooks and things that scholars would be discussing and reading about within their own networks. So it is as much as he can possibly get into this framework as possible.
He has this really phenomenal quote that says, if a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. So it's just a real testament to the power of protecting and telling one's own story there.
Absolutely, that there is a direct connection between the histories that we tell and the politics and even the violence of the present. And if you get that wrong, there is much more space for the justification of things like lynching, which he also talks about, that there's this direct connection between the erasure of Black history and the murder of Black people.
Hey, it's Jody with a word about a fellow Radiotopia show, The Recipe. So I don't know about you, but with inflation and grocery prices what they are, and the fact that it's pretty cold where I live, I am spending a lot more time in my kitchen cooking recipes for me and my family and friends. The good old-fashioned dinner party, by the way, it's coming back. Give it a shot. I think this is the year we're going to become the home cooks we were all meant to be. And one of our newer Radiotopia shows is here to help on our culinary journey. It is The Recipe with Kenji and Deb. Kenji and Deb, of course, are J. Kenji Lopez-Alt and Deb Perlman, two of the best home cooks alive. I'm sure you know Kenji's YouTube, his contributions to the New York Times recipes, Deb's iconic cooking blog, Smitten Kitchen. I actually just went to my saved recipes on the New York Times cooking app to see which of Kenji's recipes were on there, and there are a ton. I like to make his vegan chili, his Taiwanese beef noodle soup. He has a great salmon recipe, and most importantly, he's the one that really got me to learn how to scramble eggs to perfection. So, The Recipe. In each episode, Kenji and Deb talk about the essential ingredients and techniques of a beloved everyday dish, the little things that make a dish really sing. One of the things I really love about this is that they have different styles and they sometimes disagree. That makes for a great podcast, and it's kind of the beauty of cooking. You have to figure out what works for you. And The Recipe is there to help. So go ahead and check it out from Radiotopia and PRX, The Recipe with Kenji and Deb. You can listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Happy cooking. So, we're a few weeks into the new year. Do you feel like a new you? One opportunity we get to reimagine ourselves can come through a new wardrobe. Seriously, refreshing your clothes can go a long way. And this year, I've resolved to keep my look fresh while also trying to stay on a budget. Luckily, there's Quince. Let's go through a few early year wardrobe items. It might be cold wherever you're listening to this right now. Well, how about a Mongolian cashmere sweater? $50. Maybe you've resolved to hit the gym more? Okay, well, there's plenty of activewear options from sports bras to leggings. New year, new business. You want to look sharp in suits and blazers. They're on there as well. For me, we're going to be doing a lot more video episodes of this podcast this year, and I'm not going to go out there looking like a schlub. So keep an eye out when you watch those for some classy sweaters and button-downs. I can get it together when I need to, folks, and Quince is going to help. Upgrade your closet this year without the upgraded price tag. Go to quince.com/thisday for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. No, I'm curious, and this I'll tell you a little bit of kind of my evolution in thinking about this as well. But I think you hear often around Black History Month, this idea of, well, we're telling the story and we're focusing on the story here of Black Americans, descendants of enslaved people, and that's a subsection of this country's history, and we're sort of devoting some time to focus on that. And I think the next level of thinking is really an understanding that you can't tell the story of American history without the story of slavery and without the story of Black Americans, and that white history is Black history, and that, even if you had a White History Month, which is probably every other month of the year, it's impossible to tell it without talking about slavery and Black Americans. And I think like that level of, and I'm curious just then sort of your thoughts on kind of the focusing and whether the focusing does segregate, for lack of a better word, this conversation and maybe put it off to the side and not make it really feel like it's embedded in any history you tell. This country has to acknowledge all these other factors.
It's, that's something that I try to balance with in my own classroom, is that I don't want to segregate out the history. So when I tell you about George Washington and all of his military feats, I'm also going to talk to you about him as a slaveholder and what that means to hold that the fullness of his identity as a great military leader and a slaveholder in the same space. And I think we can do the same thing with Black history, which is American history. We can talk about multiple things simultaneously and complicate these narratives, really just give them nuance, right? Like, how do we make sense of the world that we live in a way that's impacting not just white people, but also Black people and Indigenous people and Asian people? Like, there's a whole way of incorporating these identities and contributions that give us a fuller picture of who or what America is.
Yeah, and that evolution, it takes so much time because you want to move past just the addition model where you just start throwing more Black people into the curriculum without necessarily rethinking the story you're telling. But as late as like the 1960s and the 1970s, the main history textbooks in the United States mention 2 Black people in the entire history book up until that point. And so it takes so long just to get to the addition model that this idea of truly incorporating Black history into the story of U.S. history and acknowledging that it is U.S. history. It's why we're fighting about it now, because it takes that long to actually incorporate those ideas.
And I guess that gets us back a little to tracing the evolution of Black History Month. It really, as you were saying, in the 40s and 50s, it still feels completely unacknowledged. And then, something does start to shift, no surprise, I suppose, in the 60s and 70s. In 76, it's when Gerald Ford decrees Black History Month as a national observance. But what is your sense of how much Black History Month is a decreed governmental, we're going to do this, acknowledge, or how much is it a sort of cultural thing?
I think this question about segregation of Black history to 1 month versus all year round, that in a period in which we're talking about Black history so much more in a broad national conversation that's been going on for a few years now, that Black History Month can do something different, right? Yes. That it doesn't just have to be like, oh, right, Black people wrote a book. And it can instead be about these like deeper ethical conversations, like where do we source these goods? Are we paying Black creators?
Yes.
I think that
because there's
no
point
there.
in buying that T-shirt if no Black hands were part of the creation of that work, So it does have to be authentic, literally from root to bloom. Like, you have to be able to see that this is a meaningful way to present someone with an opportunity to purchase something that was created by Black people. Otherwise, it does become one of those sort of like cliche, I mean, we saw it for years in the McDonald's, McDonald's celebrates Black History Month 365, so I don't know. I have conflict over it, but at the same time, I can't be mad at people that want to celebrate Black culture.
Yeah, and if it's a sort of starts a conversation as opposed to feels like it checks a box, then that's always the goal.
For sure.
The history of we're getting a little meta here, but the history of Black History Month, I think reflects a lot of this stuff too. And interestingly enough, Woodson himself, I think, someone who maybe has written out or forgotten a little bit from the history of Black History Month, but and it's not until it's really Obama in 2016, I think, who really takes the time. And that was in 2016 was the 40th anniversary of when Ford had first proclaimed Black History Month, and Obama, takes the time to really highlight Woodson, and so I think Woodson is interestingly coming back into the story a little bit more. And Black History Month. Other interesting dates were Kent State University apparently in the early 70s was one of the first ones to sort of mark Black History Month, and then as we said, Ford in 76, and now it's very interesting. But a number of other countries also celebrate it as well, and I'd be curious to hear what the conversation is like there in the UK or Canada, Germany, Ireland, and the Netherlands have Black History Month as well.
It's pretty fascinating that Woodson, who starts Negro History Week and Black History Month, becomes the subject of Black History Month by this point in time.
Right. So as we wrap up, I just want to highlight one thing, which is, listeners, you've probably noticed over the course of this conversation, we've talked about Negro History Week and then Black History Month, and Carter's organization also used African American, and there's an interesting shift when Obama and then Trump, I think, notably called it African American History Month, and then Biden has now gone back to Black History Month. Anyway, that's going to be the next episode, is we're going to have a conversation about all this interesting language and how it's evolved and what it means, whether it really matters in the end, of all these different terms. So, but you can trace that, and that's a big part of the terms by which we have the conversation is a big part of the conversation and a big part of the history. So that's going to be next episode with Jelani Cobb. It's going to be really fascinating. That's next episode. But anyway, this has been really interesting, and I'm glad we got to talk about Woodson. I'm sure we will talk about Woodson many other times. We will learn the most important lesson of Black History Month, which I think we do pretty well. But don't just talk about it during February. We will find other times to have this conversation. But Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. If you'd like to support the show and the network directly, we can't do this show without you. You can do so at our website, thisdaypod.org. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Kala Nakua helps with transcripts. Get in touch if you have any questions or comments or ideas for topics on the show or special guests that you would like us to have on. You can email us thisdaypod@gmail.com, or you can find a form at thisdaypod.com. On our website, you can also get full archives, transcripts, and learn lots more about the show. My name is Jody Avirgan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia.
From